So we're going to go ahead and bring up our closing keynote people up on the stage all at once. Get the good seats while you can. It's easier to come up on this side. That's fine. Where's...
Okay, I'll go there. Are we missing one?
I think so.
David, where are you? Message him.
Maybe he thought it was 4:30.
So no one wanted to sit next to me. That's not going to be good for my self-esteem.
Oh.
That's fine. Thank you. That's a true friend right there.
He's awesome.
So I'm not being a millennial, being on my phone, just texting Dave.
You can just both stand up.
Well, I guess we'll do some intros as we get started. So hi, my name is Brian Pichman. I'm the Director of Strategic Innovation at the Evolve Project and one of your program coordinators. So I helped put the program together. So thank you for all being here today and hanging out for the last session on the last day. I know some of you probably have a plane that you want to catch. So I want to introduce our lovely esteemed panel, and we're going to just have a casual conversation about the conference, some random questions I jotted down on a note moments before we started, and go from there. So immediately to my left is Kim. I've known Kim for like 3 or 4 years now. One of the most lovely people I've ever met. Heart of gold, and go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I work at TechnipFMC, global energy company, and I am Director of Employee Communications and Change Management, and I'm excited to be here learning from all of you this week, and from you.
Oh, Ross told me to introduce him first, and he bribed me with his wonderful book, which I forgot to bring up on stage.
That's okay.
So
I'm Ross Smith. I'm here as the author of the AI Revolution in Customer Service and Support. I also have a new book, AI in the Classroom. Do a lot of work to teach responsible AI to students and educators through a nonprofit, FutureWorld Alliance.
And last but not least, on our stage with us right now is Sandra.
Hello, everyone. Sandra Montanino. It's a pleasure and honor to be. I'm not even sure how I got on this panel of esteemed people, to be honest.
I think I met you last year, and I was impressed with everything you were saying, and I was like, you should be up here so I look intelligent, or I have intelligent friends.
I am a lawyer for the Canadians, attorney for the Americans by background. Don't hold it against me. And I'm in a reform stage now of that. I worked in professional services, though, for a very long time, initially in knowledge management, and then shifted over to more of a professional development, learning and development lens. So Jane often would bring me to this conference where there was a culture piece, a learning and development piece, a skills development side to things. Now I own my own company called Navigate Professional Development, where I help others navigate their workplaces for professional success, whether that's coaching, facilitation, training and development around leadership, communication, and all things change management, conflict, and culture.
Awesome. So to kick us off and get us in the right frame of mind, what was one thing that you heard at this conference as like a key takeaway, or something that you've never heard before, and you're like, wow, I'm going to take this back and tell all my friends about it? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go. So for me, I sat in a talk earlier today on reskilling, and it got me thinking. They talked a lot about prompt engineering and a lot of the stuff that I'm familiar with, but what clicked for me was the influence of this profession in the world of agentic AI, and how, we heard about just before, information architecture, all those things will be so important as we get into specialized agents who can not only, retrieve, but can actually go do stuff. And so I think that was the biggest enlightenment, I think, for me so far.
Okay.
But I expect to hear more on this panel, so.
Yeah. For me, it was the focus on agentic AI and AI for AI, so using AI to make your AI better. And it got me really excited about the different agents that we can create to make AI better for KM, while picking up the thread of many of the presenters always balancing the human, because if tech doesn't support or make life better for humans, we don't need it. So I really like the sort of the evolution of where we can go with it to make it better for us by making it be agents that will help us without us losing who we are.
I love that.
To build on what both of them have expressed, for sure, the idea that we're past the bright, shiny object. Now we're really on to exploring what it can do. And I think there was an observable gap between what we have and what we are aspirationally hoping to have and what our current experience is. And that really will rely on the collaboration between AI and the human experience to augment and amplify as opposed to, replace. And to do that, really coming back to what is the currency that we're needing right now, and trust, transparency, accountability. So I think this room brings so much to be able to use those skills to be able to deal in that currency in their organizations and help us amplify the human experience.
Awesome. Something keyed off when you said, Kim, about using AI to make AI better. I was at an event and someone questioned, because I was talking about how I use AI to write my emails and summarize, because I don't want to read emails. And they're like, well, at some point, isn't someone else you're going to run into that also uses AI to write an email and send an email? So at what point now are we taking the human out of email communication, which I was like, that's fine with me, but apparently that's not a social norm. So what do you think about, will it be in a place where AI is going to respond to our emails and somebody else is using an AI agent to do the same, and so AI is going to just start talking back to itself, back and forth, or is it already doing that?
Can I jump in on that one? Because there was an interesting article recently by Amy Gallo, who does a lot for the HBR, saying, kind of like a Dear Abby column, where someone wrote in and said, I had a great relationship with my coworker, and we had a really, we talked about all sorts of things. It was warm, it was friendly, but recently I noticed that my coworker is using AI to draft their emails, and I can sense a change in tone, and I don't like it. I all of a sudden feel more distant from this person. What am I supposed to do? And so the answer, maybe you're all way ahead of me on this, but the answer was lean into the curiosity. So often people are doing things, their behaviors, because they think they should. They don't realize that it's missing something or taking something away from that relationship. To lean into having those honest conversations and look at leadership in these kinds of positions to help people understand when is it good to use? When is drafting and writing a good use of AI? And when might you want to lean into the more human elements? What's the goal of that interaction? And is a human connection at the heart of it? Well, maybe that's not the best purpose. Or use it to get you 60% and get you the rest of the way with something that is uniquely yours. We've all received probably communications from people where we right away go, this has been spammed to 5 other people. So I lose trust. I lose sort of connection with that person.
Or maybe the advice to go back to your coworker and tell them to train their model better.
Yeah.
So it sounds more like that.
Yeah.
That's how mine does it.
Yeah.
I'd like to pick up on that. I'm old enough to remember when we transitioned to all electronic gas pumps. And I felt really sad because I felt like those people that did that, who were so nice and wiped my windshield, weren't going to have jobs, and it was a terrible thing. I was kind of a bleeding heart. Still am. But that was a transactional thing, and those people got different jobs. And so I think with AI, if it's a transactional email, I'm perfectly fine with having your AI written email talk to my AI written or composed generated answer. If it's a personal email, I might still use some kind of AI tool to generate it and help me get ideas, especially if it's a hard conversation, but I'm never going to let it be in the lead. So I think sort of thoughtful intentionality, just kind of picking up on what Sandra is saying, is something that we all need to be responsible for. This is something that doesn't have to happen to us. This should be something that we are deciding how to embrace, how to utilize as a tool, just like we have with any other tool. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw a cartoon of exactly that a couple months ago. Worker and boss. The worker's generating the email with AI, and the boss is having the AI read it. So, yeah, it's. I think for me, the interesting piece is you still need the human oversight, right? And there's you might have heard the legal incident where somebody used AI to generate, and they were held accountable.
Yep.
So you still need the human in the loop. Like I don't know that I'm comfortable just doing it all without me looking, but I often find it's better, and I can tweak it a little bit, but oh yeah, that's great. I wish I thought of that. So I definitely am an AI optimist, and so not everyone thinks that way, but I do feel like it, there are times that, okay, I know that was created by AI, and that's okay if you want to use it on my performance evaluation, but I know you did it, It's, I like to think of it as augmenting my abilities.
Sorry, I just heard recently this expression or this analogy, which I thought was interesting, which was pilot versus passenger. If you're using it as the pilot, then that's great because you have agency, you have control, it's you sort of governing that creative process. If you're using it as the passenger and you're just a conduit, then that's problematic, right? So try to be the pilot, not the passenger, or not passive in it. Hello, welcome.
I gotta get him a mic really quick. But as I walk away, since we're on the optimist piece, I want to make sure we have time before Dave gets his non-optimistic piece about AI and get some good feelers in first. So staying on the optimism path, what's something that we can be hopeful for or look forward to with AI? We'll do that, and the second question will be, where did it fall short? So first answer is, where can we be optimistic and hopeful?
I think you should start.
Okay, all right. So some of you may have seen my presentation yesterday, but I had a conflict with a big work review back home, and that was the first meeting where I successfully sent my digital twin. So I just made a video of AI-generated video of me, and they played it in the meeting. And I introduced everybody and welcomed the group, and I didn't have to be there. So I'm optimistic that, boy, that's a great scenario. If I can start sending my twin to work, I like that idea.
Do you want us to answer both of the optimism?
No, we'll do optimism first, and then where did it fall short?
I'm optimistic about playing with it more for all of the different ordinary things we do for KM, and also exploring more some of the things that we do that are very resource intensive, like interviews with experts, where we often have experts in the room capturing what happened, and then they're turning it into a wiki page or something like that. I still want the experts in the room with the experts. I still want the interviews to happen, but I love the idea that the AI can help us categorize and summarize, and maybe even have it look across the whole landscape, the whole ecosystem, and pull in other components of that particular type of knowledge, and have the expert before they go and the expert review them. So having it augment, be a passenger, not the pilot, in those types of normal KM activities, I think is really exciting.
Cool. Sandra, Dave?
I know that I spent some time over the last 3 days asking many people as I walked around what they were hopeful about or what they thought was they were optimistic about going forward. And so I can tell you some of the answers were being able to see patterns that they hadn't previously seen, increasing their search and find, how knowledge gets presented in ways that is more toward insight as opposed to information, capturing the tacit, more innovation, better user experience, lower barriers to access. So those were some of the things that people were sharing. For me, I think I'm really excited and optimistic at the idea of moving beyond the minimum things, like the automating the easy, low-hanging fruit stuff, and really looking at ways to get deeper and more curious and more innovative in the way that we're using it. So I'm really optimistic it'll help us do more that way.
I'm optimistic about the future of AI. I'm pessimistic about the future of LLMs. And I think that's a really important distinction. AI has huge potential to do all sorts of things. I mean, if I'm being quite honest, I think I'm fairly optimistic that those of us with cognitive function left in about 6 months will be able to exploit the advantages presented by those people who haven't, because they've moved entirely dependent on AI, on LLMs. I mean, just to be, it's that brutal. We know there's massive cognitive decline if you hand over functions to LLMs, and it happens very, very quickly. Right? And we're not looking at that, and we're not really looking at AI as we should do. And I still remember the work I used to do on genetic algorithms and neural networks. There's huge potential, but it's not just language processing.
Let's talk about the not optimistic about LLMs then. What did you mean by that?
First of all, you can't reduce human knowledge to text and text processing. Yeah? You can't reduce the ability of humans to handle things abductively, to handle novelty without training data sets. If you create high dependency on things which require training data sets which are hugely biased, LLMs are now feeding off data which is 55% their own output. Right? And that corrupts the models. Right? So there's some really dangerous things going on. We know there are things that human beings have to do, which LLMs can do, and can do better than humans. But if human beings don't do them for several years, they lose the capacity to exercise judgment and reasoning. So people are just rushing into this without actually thinking about it or thinking about the scientific evidence.
What about you guys? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll agree with that at a high level. And about the people over-relying on it, and we heard it a couple different ways, plane versus passenger, but over-relying and losing skills and losing that creative or critical thinking skill that we have today because they get lazy and, hey, this is good enough, and that is the worry, especially in the classroom and students coming up.
There's a general heuristic we're using at the moment. Given the current state of LLMs, if they can do a task better than you probably shouldn't be doing that task in the first place. And that applies to most management consultants. An LLM can outperform most management consultants because it's better at synthesizing text in order to create something convincing for which you can charge a lot of money. Right? And hopefully, I'm going to be hopeful, hopefully the resurrection of consultants who are able to actually listen and look and think rather than regurgitate text might actually come through.
There was a concept at one point going around called the smartphonication of life. And it was the idea that we're outsourcing so much of our thinking and memory capacity to these devices that it atrophies, obviously, in ourself over time, and we lose those capabilities. And the idea was, well, in the rational explanation is, well, we're outsourcing those things because they're low-level things, and if we reinvest in the high-level things, then we're not going to lose those things in our brain. But what we found, in actual fact, is people weren't reinvesting that time in the high-level thinking things. They were like doom scrolling and using that time to do things that were not sort of furthering their critical thinking and judgment and subject matter expertise. So I think leadership plays a massive role right now in helping people to understand what they're potentially losing, to any productivity gains that you're getting. Where are you reinvesting that time? Where are you actually using these technologies to push your thinking, to let you learn more things than you could have learned before, to really push and challenge your own biases and blind spots? If you're using it just to affirm your view, then it's not going to do the things that we need it to do.
Yeah, I think it goes back to something I said before. It's about intentionality, that we use it in ways that will help and that don't enable us just to lose skills that we do need, but we use it to especially help with rote things or things that are far beyond our capacity, like looking beyond across tons and tons of data sets to identify trends in the medical industry or something. I'm not an expert on any of that, but I love that there are possibilities that smarter people than me are currently exploring.
There's something it might be interesting to do, all right? I would be fascinating to look at a conference like this and do an analysis of how many people used LLMs to help put together their presentations.
Can we just ask, how many of us use LLMs in our slides just in general? You can be honest. We can close our eyes and raise our hands if you want.
Okay. First of all, I don't believe that, all right? Because what we actually see when people use LLMs is things homogenize.
Yeah.
And I would say at this conference, for all the speeches I've gone to, there's been more similarity in what people say than at any previous conference. And that's what LLMs do. They homogenize down to an average of what the training data sets are, and therefore you reduce variety in the system and you reduce interaction with people.
I'll confess, I don't think it's clever, but I actually used it to prepare for this to help me with my own memory. So I used my personal one and said, tell me everything Kim Glover, me, has ever said externally about AI, and then internally, look across all the files that I've ever created in my emails and tell me anything I've ever said about AI internally to remind me what I have thought before and said, and have I matured, how have I progressed, et cetera. It was moderately interesting since I'm not an expert, but it was helpful because I could find the files, but it did it faster.
There's a biological thing which is important to understand. This is Freeman's work. There are chemicals which break up the neuroreceptors in the brain, so we actually can't remember anything quite the same way twice. And that's absolutely critical for human evolution. It creates what's called a gradient. LLMs actually remember everything perfectly. And there are all sorts of reasons why that's dangerous. Because you don't get the creativity, you don't get the ability to sense something, you don't get the ability to forget that you know something, so you know something new.
That's interesting.
I didn't know if we were allowed to raise our hand or not, but
Yeah, you can raise your hand.
I built a custom model on our book content, and since the presentation was going to be about that, then I went in there. I did an outline because I want it to be exact, but then I fill in. Okay, how am I going to talk about that? I'm picking the pictures and the actual content, but I did use it for the outline.
I think Harvard did it. There was an interesting study that talked about how AI is also influencing human language. So one of the things that I would point out to people, if I see the word delve in a conversation, I'm like, I know that was AI generated because we use dive incorrectly. That's not the right word. But now they're saying that we're using delve in our natural language because we're seeing the word delve generated from AI content.
The word I've noticed is absolutely. It always comes back with that. Can you help me with this? Absolutely.
And we also anthropomorphize AI. I wrote a series of things the other day on the blog, which I can't perfectly remember, but you can read them. Please don't get AI to search for them, but if you have to, do. We said anthropomorphization of AI is really dangerous because you don't perceive it in the right way. I mean, it's something really simple you could do at a conference like this. Somebody claims expertise in a subject. Say, that's fine, put them on the stage. Give them a subject they have to talk about from that expertise, and do not allow them slides or time to prepare. Because anybody with real expertise will be able to handle that. Yeah, and it's actually really good exercise to do for yourself. Yeah, is to get rid of those crutches and find ways to interact with people and to test what people actually know.
Well, that kind of brings me to one of the questions I want to save for the end, but what would be a skill that us KMers should have for 2026? Like, what would be a good skill to have that we could utilize?
I think I don't know if it's a skill, it's a mindset. Fearlessness. I think we need to play to win instead of playing not to lose. And I think we have to bring in intentionality, and that the only way to win is together. So we need to partner within our organizations, with the AI teams, with IT, with HR, and we need to figure out responsible and ethical ways to do this stuff. And we need to be fearless in trying to lead the way, even though this is uncharted territory. Somebody said earlier in one of the presentations I went to that the edges are jagged. They're tremendously jagged. I don't think we should be afraid to test and be curious, but I also don't think we should just mindlessly follow, oh, everyone's using AI in their KM program, we're going to too, we're going to do it exactly the way they did. I think we need to really step into the shoes that we've been wearing all these years, when for many, many times KM has filled the void, that white space between the other disciplines, and we need to do it again and figure out the answer together. But I think we need to be in front.
You like that?
Yeah, I'll say I'm not a KMer, but I think it's important for all humans to be curious and be learning. This world is moving very quickly. We don't know where it's going, what it's going to be like. And so I think it's important as humans to step in and be human and understand and learn. And, you know, as Dave, as you said, if you're doing a thing that's going to be where the AI is going to replace you, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And the way that you realize that is by being curious and learning. I think that's an important part.
I love both of those answers. Very, very favorite thing around being continuous learner and curious and fearless. And I think KM plays a unique role right now. To Kim's point, this is something that touches every single piece of the organization in ways that I don't think we've seen in sort of recent things now. And I think KM plays a unique role to be a translator for a lot of people, to lead by example, to really lean into their role as, you know, being able to connect various pieces of the organization and show leadership and how this can be done, whether it's guardrails, whether it's trust, whether it's usage, whether it's thinking, mindset. I love all of those. So I think KM plays a unique role in being able to step in and demonstrate leadership there.
I think three things. First of all, just a minor point, and I think language actually really matters. If we talk about things like mental models and mindsets, we're actually using language which is very unscientific. You know, the human brain is not an intelligent camera. Yeah, it doesn't process information through models. That's actually what AI does. The human brain is actually intimately connected with the body and its social environment. And the language really matters in terms of where you're positioned. But I think there are three things, and they haven't really changed in the 30 years since knowledge management started. And KM has generally made the wrong choice. First of all, you need to choose channels over content. It's far more important to build channels through which knowledge will flow when it's needed, yeah, rather than to actually focus on content. Yeah, talking about today, building informal networks, creating mechanisms by which knowledge is created in the act of need, rather than stored on the basis that it might be needed. Right, so that's one thing. I think the other thing, and this is much more difficult, is sense-making is about patterns, it's not about precision. Yeah, the ability to handle what we call essential ambiguity, the ability to sense patterns and to start to explore journeys is a skill which the IT generation has lost because it kind of like wants things to be structured. Yeah, it wants it. Somebody said on one of the conferences today, we need to get rid of all this messy data. I sort of walked out at that point. I needed a drink. Because actually, we need things to be messy because then we discover novel things, all right? This desire for neatness and tidiness is something. And I think the other thing is knowledge management people should be the journalists of the organization. You should be reading anthropology. You should be reading physics. There's fascinating stuff coming out of constructor theory at the moment, which suggests information may be a fifth type of matter. Yeah, anthropology is discovering things about the way that human beings interact, which are essential to KM. And I could go on through other disciplines. We've actually lost very few people under the age of 60 are generalists. Right? And that ability to synthesize and integrate disciplines is getting progressively lost. And I would hope, all right, if I want to be really optimistic, knowledge management is a discipline that finds that. When I proposed an MBA to Bangor University when I was there, they all thought it was a wonderful idea, but they couldn't handle setting it up in less than 15 years, which was depressing. And I said, instead of a master's degree where you go and study case studies about what people think other companies did, because the case studies are never accurate anyway, what you do for 2 years is you study the conversion courses that universities have. You know, if you've not done biology before, right, there's a short course on biology. You've not done philosophy before, there's a short course on philosophy. So you spend 2 years doing those basic introductory courses, and then in the final year, you put that knowledge together in a thesis, to prove that you can apply that knowledge. Now, if we just had 2 or 3% of knowledge management able to do that sort of work, then we would add real value to the company.
Is there anything you want to add?
I completely agree about your comment, all of them actually, but the generalist comment, I think our ability to utilize components of adjacent disciplines, quoting Linda, is terribly important and what makes KMers different and special. If we're able to harness those, if we're able to do some change management and project management and understand the social constructs within our organizations and a ton of other things that I'm sure you could list, and I can't at the moment, but I think, wouldn't it be cool if we could be educated, knowledgeable generalists who can also use these advancing tools in ways that are ethical and don't hallucinate and don't rely on stuff that isn't accurate and don't take away our ability to think. If we could focus on innovating and doing those uniquely human things like dialogue and like being in a room together and saying, what if we, or have we ever tried, or blue sky ideation.
Yeah, I think sorry, I just want to add to that because I think there's an interesting distinction around leaning in versus leaning away from difficult things, and the idea of being a generalist and using this opportunity to learn more about things more deeply in order to bring more collective insight and thought to those various tangential disciplines. But right now I think we're using tools to lean away from difficult things instead of lean into difficult things.
Yeah, I have working for me 4 young, very bright women in their 30s with master's degrees or PhDs in subjects. As a collective, they will not do research using LLMs. Because the process of doing the research, of reading things and thinking about it, is something that you can't substitute. Yeah? You can use LLMs to do integration. I mean, I said the other day, and it's the example I've given, I've just written a new paper which hasn't been published yet, looking at what's called perdurability, which is the ability of an organization to survive by change. Key concept, incorporates anti-fragility, resilience. I'm quite pleased with it. So I fed 3 LLMs, all the papers I'd read, the books I'd read, and said, what is David Snowden's opinion about this? What would he likely write? It was so badly wrong, it was appalling, but it was terribly convincing. Mm-hmm. When I fed it the paper I'd written and said, what will be the objections to this? It got it perfectly right. And I think that's one of the illustrations of what you can do. Because, of course, it's something new. So how could it create something new? But it could say how something which was old would react to novelty. Mm-hmm. And I think there are practices we need to institute in our companies very quickly. Otherwise we'll lose those capabilities, which is the point you made as well.
I think the most interesting piece, I think, reflection on that, is it took you, the human, to know what was bad and what was good. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think that's a role that's important for us to retain.
And what if we could create examples like the one you just gave that were unique to what we do inside our companies? So we could show this is never going to work for this, but it's really cool for that.
There's a good paper which came out. You can find it quite quickly on the web, all right? The title is a variation of Humans Hallucinate, AI Bullshits. Right? And the hallucination word is actually the wrong word to use, because the way human beings actually use hallucination as a way to make sense of the world. We use imagination, we use fiction, we're constantly producing micro-hallucinations, begin testing them against reality. Right? And that's part of the way we actually make decisions. AI is just trying to convince you of something. How many people have had an AI when you said, did you really mean that? Said, oh, that's very bright of you. No, I didn't, I got it wrong, right? I mean, why anybody carries on when they get in that, I do not know.
Well, I call my ChatGPT Chad, so we have a good working relationship. So we go back and forth on things.
Anthropomorphization.
Yeah, he makes me feel
But
good in the
the more
morning.
scary perhaps is that when I get an answer that I agree with or I like, my confirmation bias is running wild, and I just look at it and I go, oh, that's absolutely right, that sounds great. When I get an answer that disagrees with my worldview, then I tend to challenge it more. So, but it doesn't mean that had the one before I
You
challenged,
do
I
it
probably would have
politely, though,
discovered.
right? You challenge-
Very polite.
Good,
I'm
'cause
very
I don't need
polite
no
to my-
terminator.
So you're one of the
because
ones
you.
who had question mark and says thank you. And one of the most scary things I saw the other day, and we're currently starting to do work on new forms of democracy, new forms of citizen engagement. And we're using AI there to actually make connections and links. But every single judgment node is always human. So using AI to connect, to link, to represent, yes, humans are always going to be judgment. But there was somebody the other day, and this, I think, illustrates a lot of the problems with AI, who said the future is for everybody to have a digital twin and to let the digital twin vote for them, because then it will be more objective. Yeah? But I hate to tell you this, that's the implication of a lot of what people are saying. Because there's this belief that somehow or other AI will be magically objective, and will solve all of the problems of the world. I mean, it's meant to solve climate change when its energy consumption is accelerating climate disaster, right? And I think there's this human desire to, it's a kind of like, I'm a Catholic, so this is not anti-religious, all right? It's a desire to create a magical thing which will somehow deal with all the things we're bad at. And you can see that in an awful lot of the literature, right? And so that's really dangerous because it makes us, to quote McIntyre, anxious stutterers in the story of our own existence.
So the last question I'll leave us today, I know you all do a lot of consulting, you help a lot of individuals out and a lot of teams. I'm going to ask for some free advice. So in today's changing world and how we look to move forward, what is like a concern or something that you're hearing about or people are asking you about to help solve? So like what's something that you're constantly hearing in the work that you do of like, wow, we don't know what to do about this and we don't know how to handle that. What do you see in that regard and what is your answer? Does that make sense?
Specific to AI?
Anything, general. We talked enough about AI today, I don't want to hear any more.
I mean, I'll throw something in. I had the privilege many years ago of having been publicly humiliated on a stage in San Diego by Peter Drucker. I made a mistake, and if you've ever been taken apart by a 19-year-old genius, you know what you're doing. Either way, he took pity on me and took me out for dinner, and we then talked together. And one of the things he used to famously say about consultants is the role of a consultant is to be a butterfly and a pollinator, not to do the work. And one of the most fundamental errors which happened with consultancy, it grew out of systems thinking in the 80s and 90s, is the idea that you bring consultants in to do the work for you rather than develop the capability yourself. So I think one of the things consultants need to think about is there's old Celtic legends about this, about the hero who comes in and saves the day, but they have to die before they see the resolution. Otherwise, they would get overconfident. I can't remember the name. And that's actually quite a good story. The thing I'm seeing, and it's very fundamental, is there's a huge desire to radically reduce cost, reduce risk, but deliver more. Yeah? And at the moment, we're stuck into a systems thinking paradigm from the 80s, which means the way we think we solve problems essentially gets more and more expensive and more complicated. And we've actually reduced the way we make decisions to the point where AI can outcompete us. Yeah? So if I'm going to be optimistic, I think that pressure will drive people back into new ways of thinking about the world so we can deliver significantly more at significantly lower cost, not just to ourselves but to the planet.
I like that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I get to think
Rock,
longer
paper,
if you
scissors
talk
for it.
first. Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. So I'll go back to sort of the previous question that was similar in that just experiment, be curious, learn, use this technology to be a better human. I gave a talk to some high school students who had just done a 6-week AI course. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The first, You don't know AI. You can't use AI. How many of you consider yourself an artist? No hands go up. How many can write a song? No hands go up. How about a poem? A couple hands go up. Okay, now with AI, artist, every hand goes up. Song, every hand. Poem, every hand. And I said, okay, how many of you have been told by teachers and or administrators or your parents that using LLMs or generative AI is cheating? Every hand went up. So we're in this interesting dichotomy where, the creative arts, students, the self-confidence that students are getting is increasing. They're leaning on a technology and probably losing skills that, like, they will never pursue going to create a song without AI. But their self-confidence to label themselves is up. So it's this weird, there's no right answer, but I think it just comes back to incumbent on all of us to just watch what's going on, learn, experiment, build your digital twin, try and write a song, so you understand what's capable and what you're able to point out, this is right and this is wrong. I think that's important.
I'll take a little bit of a different tact, but building on that, which is, I really think both a challenge and an opportunity is to bring all generations to bear on this problem and really leverage people's strengths and insights and perspectives. I see a lot with the clients that I work with in professional services, there being a bit of friction right now on a generational level around people who, to Dave's point, have that generalist perspective and have been in the workforce for 40 years and have that big picture view, expecting juniors to be able to use the easy button and just magically have that without necessarily realizing the requirement of them to invest back into the system. And so I think there is an opportunity for leaders, people of all generations, to really help people understand and encourage the right behaviors. The juniors that I'm seeing right now are actually using it less than some of the senior folks in law firms. And the senior folks are saying, this is fantastic. I know how to delegate. I'm getting the work of a first-year associate, or 60% of a draft, 80% of a draft, and I don't have to deal with the people. But we need them to deal with the people. We need them to deal with the juniors, because how else are the juniors going to then understand that thinking, that narrative behind what's going on in the document, in the negotiations, the nuances that are impossible to get from other venues. So I hope people take it as a call to action, especially when we layer on hybrid workplaces, remote work, situations that make our lives a little bit more difficult to do that, but really reinvest in making sure that we're bringing people along and elevating people at this time, not leaving them behind.
I had that debate with Sam Polizano years ago, and we were looking at then what was called Fountain Park, which was IBM's AI center. And he said, this will replace middle management. And I remember looking at him and saying, where do you think senior management will come from? And he actually hadn't thought about that. All right? There's a book by Neil Stephenson. If you don't know Neil Stephenson as a science fiction writer, I recommend you discover him. His worst ever book, with the best 3 chapters, is a book called Dodging Hell. Yeah, most of the book is terrible, and he hasn't quite forgiven me for saying that yet. But the first 3 chapters are brilliant. It speculates on a world in which only the rich can have their information curated. Yeah, only the rich can have their information curated. If you are not rich, you are sold to a religion or to a commercial company. Right? Now, the scary thing is we're already there. The other really scary thing, if you look at who goes to some of the elite schools in the US, many of the elite schools have actually advertised that they do not let kids use technology. And a lot of the people creating that technology are sending those children to those schools. And I think one of the questions is, what will be the new elite and how are we sold? Because there's a modern form of slavery which you can see starting to come into play.
So I guess my response to your question isn't as existential as yours, and I'm going to have to ponder that and get that book. I would say that it's helping people navigate change. That's what I'm hearing the most. And remembering that we have to meet them where they are, which is for every human, every generation. different. And that requires that most human of capabilities, which is empathy. And so I'm trying to lean into empathy and emotional intelligence. And if anybody has any recommendations for me on that, I'd love to hear them. Because I think embracing, as you're saying, Dave, what is uniquely human will help us get through this change and to the next one.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to close this up now. Thank you for all of your wisdom and your time today, everyone. Let's give a big round of applause for our keynote peoples. I set you all free. I got to read my notes, which obviously are on my phone. We are doing a cool event in London next year called KMWorld, and then a taxonomy boot camp in London. You will get an email tomorrow with a survey and a reminder that the presentations are available on the website. And please fill out the survey. Let us know how you thought of everything, any ideas, suggestions, and so forth. And once again, have safe travels home. And thank you for joining us for KMWorld 2025.